Hi, my name is Kefanganga. I'm a real estate consultant in Nairobi. Welcome to the Real Estate Academy. We are going to discuss different property types. We are going to discuss the different locations you can find these property types in Nairobi. And we're also going to discuss utilities and the uses that we typically use these properties for. We're going to start with residential units. Residential units are what we typically refer to as an abode or accommodation. These are properties that you sleep in. And these properties, when you rent them, they are rented on a month-to-month basis. But you could also buy them and occupy them with your family. Now, they come in different types. The different types include, number one, an apartment. An apartment is a multi-dweller residential unit. So you have one big building and then you have different units that are owned or occupied by different people. Apartments typically are defined by common utilities such as common parking, you have common water supply, you have common garbage management, you have common utilities for electricity as well. You also have common areas as you walk through. So apartments can be owned by one person or by different people, each person owning an apartment. Number two in these types of residential units include bungalows. Bungalows are units that are built on an individual plot of land. They have one access and they also have other amenities such as a garden, you could have parking, you could have a water tank, and they typically occupy one floor. You could find this in residential neighborhoods. You could find them in Muthaiga, they are in Mountain View, they're in Karen. Also, you have what we call a mansionette. A mansionette is ideally a bungalow but occupies two floors. So you've built a residential single dweller unit on the same plot, but you have two floors. So you have bedrooms on the first floor, you have accommodation or living room on the ground floor. These units are also available in posh neighborhoods. You could find them on Kiambu Road, on Thika Road, in the Ruiru area. You could find them in Runda. So these are very common with higher end neighborhoods. Also, you have what we call townhouses. Townhouses are units that are built across a large piece of land and they are built consecutively. So ideally you have one unit ending on one wall and the next building or unit beginning on that wall. So these are units that typically share a wall. You would have common access, you have common security, you have common utilities such as electricity, but ideally each unit has its own parking and its own access. These units ideally do not have a lot of privacy as compared to a bungalow or a mansionette. Now, when you move past residential buildings, you go into what we call commercial buildings. Commercial buildings are buildings ideally used for business. You use to generate income. So commercial buildings can be malls, they can be shopping areas, they can be offices. So they vary depending on which location you're discussing. So for example, commercial buildings in town or Upper Hill or Westlands include offices and office parks. In other areas, they include shopping areas. For example, in Pipeline, you're going to find commercial buildings. You have petrol stations. There are places where you would typically find businesses operating. You have petrol stations, you have shopping malls and supermarkets, you have grocery stores. So these ideally are what are commercial properties. These properties are rent or typically you would occupy them on a contractual basis. So they would have to draft a contract for you for a long duration of time. This is assumed that if you're setting up a business, you need time for this business to establish, you need some time for this business to grow. So typically the lease or occupation is for a long duration of time. So you can find this in different areas around you depending on the activities that you have. Offices are used for transactions and businesses where people will report every day, they conduct business and pay rent. The same as commercial shopping areas where you have stalls, you have restaurants where people can come to your restaurant and eat and pay. So ideally they are businesses. Now, other types of commercial properties are what we call industrial properties. Industrial properties are used in manufacture and production of goods. So you'd find them in industrial area, you can find them within special economic zones such as Tatu City and the Nairobi Gate Park. So ideally, these are places where you have companies operating that operate production of goods. They also have warehousing Warehousing are places where you do processing of goods. So basically, whether it's fruits from upcountry, you have goods that have been imported, they are brought to these warehouses, they are stored, they are processed, they are packaged and distributed. So these are also property types. There are places that you can buy. Ideally, you can go to the marketplace and buy a warehouse and rent it out. You can subdivide it within or between different businesses. You also have factories. Factories manufacture things. So basically you have raw materials. For example, you have the EABL factory along Thika Road. You have other factories in the industrial area that process wood or manufacture wooden products. So these are different types of properties that you're going to find in the industrial class. Now, further forward, you have specialized properties. Specialized properties are ideally hospitals. You have houses or buildings that are set up as hospitals to offer specialized care to people who are unwell. So this, we call them specialized properties. They come in different asset classes also because they depend with size. You could have them depending on ideally where they are, occupying large areas of land. There are some that are government owned, some are owned by private individuals, and they are rent for this specific use. You also have another type of specialized properties that are golf clubs or sports clubs. These are members only clubs where you pay to access and enjoy amenities. You could play golf, you could hang out with people, you could play tennis, you could swim. So these are places that have limited admission. So you come as a member, you apply for membership and you're allowed to come in. And these are very common, especially now that the land mass we have in Nairobi is reducing. There are these types of properties that are coming up, and they're available in different neighborhoods close to you. So in defining what ideally is a specific property, you are looking at the utility, as I had said. What do you use this property for? So if you're coming into the marketplace, you could decide, I don't want to go into the residential segment, I want to go into the commercial. Or you could decide, I want to go into factories and the industrial side. You could also decide, I want to go into specialized properties. Now, we have a new asset class that has come in as well. This is ideally what we call a special economic zone. This, you have them in different parts of the country, but in the Nairobi metropolitan area, you have one at Tatu City, for example. Now, this is a planned city. This has the different asset classes I've said. So you could find an area that is zoned for residential, you have an area that is zoned for commercial, you have an area that is zoned for factories, you have an area that is zoned for special properties that as I have said, which ideally would include hospitals, you have gyms, you have these other special properties that I have discussed. So these cities also have rules, they have regulations around them. Once you buy in, you're buying into a community. Now, these are provided for in law as well, so that we spur growth. So if you are trying to buy, you could also buy within those planned cities. You also have other types of properties that are government owned. So you have government hospitals, you have government institutions. So those are what ideally you should avoid. And the reason that I mentioned them is that when you're doing your due diligence, you're going to purchase a property, you need to establish whether it's privately owned or it's government or public utility. Public utility is ideally property that is owned by a community, and you have them around the neighborhoods. Ideally, this is what you'd have as a playground. So when you're going to buy property, you need to establish, one, is it zoned? And zoning means it's in law, it is segmented or provided in law that this area is supposed to be serving this utility. So you are going to look and check whether the property you are buying, is it privately held, is it public property, or is it owned by government? So this will allow you to make good decisions as you acquire the property. So as I said earlier, these are the different asset classes you're going to find in Nairobi. And you can find them in common together, so ideally in a mixed zoned area. For example, like Kilimani, you're going to find offices, you're going to find shopping areas, you're going to find golf clubs. So they are mixed, but in some areas such as Runda, for example, you're going to find it's a residential neighborhood. So as you go into the marketplace, it's important for you to understand and to establish exactly what purpose you're trying to meet with your investment. And this will allow you to go into an area that ideally serves your purpose. Of course, it goes without saying that the pricing is different for each area. For example, for residential units, you are typically going to rent on a monthly basis. Now, if you go into commercial spaces, you're going to rent per contract. If you go into specialized properties, then you're looking at membership. So these are the different types of ownership or rental arrangements that are available in the market, and occupational rights that are guaranteed by law. So you need to establish where you're trying to fit. So thank you so much for watching this episode. We'll continue answering your questions, and we look forward to your questions and also giving you consultation in regards to the property types we have in Nairobi and where you can find them and who are the providers of these properties.